Hello, hello, good morning. It's Monica from Life is Art, and it is the Friday 10 a.m. technique at the um, Weekend in Whistler online crop, and I am, of course, fiddling over here on the side, trying to get my video to show so that I can post the link to the crop. So for those of you who are joining me, feel free to pop a hello or a howdy in the comments. And if you are watching later on replay, you can just say replay. And we are going to be doing a technique today that is called Let It Pop. I'm going to show you a fun technique to create pop-up cards. Now, I've just noticed that I wanted to be a bit more zoomed in, and it looks a little wider on the YouTube video than it does on my screen. So let me see if I can zoom in a little bit and get everything in there. And that way you get a little bit closer view, because we're going to be working on a card today. And so that, doesn't take up as much space as a layout. So let me just get the link copied, and we'll pop that over in the into the crop. Let me just make sure that that's posting. Yes, it is. We're going to pin it. There we go. And all right. Now let's see if I have got my video going. Let me see. It's taken a minute to catch up. Now, I hope your view is nice and clear. Mine seems to be coming through blurry. And I'm just trying to figure out. Oh, there we go. I think it was just my just my phone trying to catch up. Okay, there we go. Enough fiddling. We've got it posted. I see some people are joining, so just say hello or howdy if you're here. And we're going to get started on our Let It Pop tutorial. This is a fun way that I use to make pop-up cards. So we're going to actually start with the front of the card first. We're going to start with some stamping. And today I'm going to be using the Snow Buddy Like You stamp set. And this is from the November-December catalog. It's got these cute little snowmen on there. One is skiing, one is skating, one is enjoying a nice hot beverage on a cold day. It's got a few sentiments. Friendships never melt away. Happy winter. There's Snow Buddy Like You. There's a couple snowflakes, and there's little holly and berries. Such a cute, fun little stamp set. And, oops. I've just pushed something on my thing, so now I don't know. Okay, there we go. And just got to make sure my camera's still rolling. Looking good. Hey, good morning, Dawn. Yes, those snowmen are so cute. And I'm going to be using that in combination with papers from the Gnomes for Winter special that is happening right now. And of course, the Gnomes for Winter is all in blues, and I love blues. You all know favorite color. Can't avoid the blues. So I'm going to start out with a very simple shape, and that is a circle that's been cut using the Circles Thin Cuts, and I've used the second largest one, which is a 2.5-inch circle cut in White Daisy. And I'm going to bring in my Intense Black ink for this little technique that I'm doing here. And also some of these little snowmen. In fact, I'm going to use all 3 of the snowman. So I'm starting out with the skier, and I'm only going to ink just the top portion of my little skier, because I really only want his face. So I'm going to stamp him right on the edge of my circle like this. So, and I didn't put my Versamat upside down, so I got to make sure I press hard. And what I'm doing is I'm getting just the edge of him on this circle. And then I can wipe off my stamp, being all responsible and cleaning my stamps, using my stamp chamois. Then I'm going to bring in this guy. He's got a little headband on with some antlers, and he's drinking some hot cocoa. So we're going to ink, again, just the top half of my stamp. And we're going to spin him around here and find a nice spot. I don't want too much of his mug on the card. A little bit doesn't hurt, but I don't want too much. So I'm using this scratch paper behind so that when I ink off the edge, it doesn't get all over my Versamat. That's the only reason for the scratch paper. And I usually have just old paper that I'm never going to use. You know, the old ones that have just the white paper on the backside, and I quite often use that up. But I've actually now pretty much used up the pack that I was using. And then I've got my last little guy here, the little skater dude. And we're going to stamp him right there. So these guys are going to kind of look like they're peering down an ice fishing hole or something. Oh, I didn't ink him enough. Goodness gracious, look at that. We left part of his scarf behind. I don't think that I could effectively line that up again without using a, what am I trying to say? Without using a stamp platform. So I'm going to do the next best thing. I don't know if any of you have ever done that, but I just doodle on the pieces that got missed. Use a permanent journaling pen and just kind of add in the pieces that got lost. It happens. And let's add a couple little snowflakes. It's not going to look as nice as the stamp, but if I had a second circle, I would just go ahead and restamp it. But I don't want to take the time this morning because this card is going to take us a few minutes to create. And so I don't want to take that time. All right. So if that part goes mushy when we go on to the coloring, it's not the ink, it's the permanent marker. All right, so let's do some coloring, and I'm going to use my Tri-Blend markers for this. I'm going to start out, let's turn it around. We're going to come around to this guy, the first one we stamped, and I've got my dull green blend, and I'm going to use the lightest color first, just to color in the pom-pom on his hat, and the cuff of the brim of his hat, the rim, and his scarf, just like that, and all around his scarf. I'm not going to do any shading on these guys, and then I'm going to switch to the darkest dull green and just do the top of his hat, like so. So this guy's going to be my green themed guy. Color that in. There we go. And then let's also color in all their noses. I'm using the tan blend for this, and I'm using the darkest color of the tan blend. So I'm just going to color in my noses, my little carrot noses on my snowman. 1, 2, and 3. Let's go back around to this green guy. We're also going to add some of the lightest lavender blend on his little cheeks. So he's going to have rosy cheeks, but instead of being rosy, they're going to be lavendery. We can totally do that, right? So that's all for him because, of course, the snow is going to be white. We don't create snowmen out of yellow snow. That's a no-no. And then I'm going to bring in my red-brown blend and color in his little antler headband that he's wearing. He's all dressed up, waiting for Santa to arrive. Just coloring that in. Good morning, Mom. Nice to see you're watching. Hello, hello. Did anybody get snow overnight? We don't have any here. All the snow we had yesterday is long gone. I'm also going to color in his hot cocoa here, trying to avoid the little marshmallows because a little bit of his hot cocoa is showing there. And then let's also give him a nice lavender scarf. So I think I'll use the lightest one here of the lavender blend. I've got my cap sitting there so you can read it, but it's totally upside down. So unless you can read upside down, that won't be helpful. So there we go. He's all colored in. Now let's turn around to this little guy, and we're going to do him in blues. So I've got my vintage blue, and we're going to color in his scarf using the lightest color. Now remember, some of this was drawn on with a marker, so if it gets smoochy, it's probably the marker, but so far so good. There we go. Has anybody else had that happen where you go to stamp and you're like, oh, I only need, part of it. And then you don't end up inking enough. Should just ink the whole thing. That's what the scratch paper's for. Switching to the mid of the vintage blue, and we're just going to color in the earmuffs and the band for the earmuffs like that. And then he's also got a little coal button on the front of him, so I'm going to bring in the true black just to color in that button right there. And that's it. We have colored up all of our little guys. And what I want to do now is to bring in some sapphire ink and my mini ink blending tool, and I'm just going to do a little bit of inking right on the edge of that just to kind of give it a finished edge. I find inking the edge sometimes just helps it look a little bit finished. Then I'm bringing in a piece of the pattern paper from the Gnomes for Christmas, and this has been cut with the 3-inch circle from the thin Circles Thin Cuts, and I'm going to ink the edges on this as well, all the way around, just like that. There we go. And we are going to go ahead and glue or adhere these two together, layering them one on top of the other. Just add some adhesive. 1, 2, 3. And we're going to stick it right in the center if we can, just like that. Isn't that cute already? But we're going to add some more things. We've got some of this pretty plaid paper from the Gnomes for Christmas, or Gnomes for Winter, sorry. And the reason why it's called Gnomes for Winter is that they're doing a series of collections. We had Gnomes for Autumn, and now we have Gnomes for Winter, so you can deduce from that that there's going to also be a spring and summer gnome collection. Super fun if you're a gnome fan. There we go. So this piece of plaid has been cut to 5 1/4 inches by 1 1/8. This sapphire cardstock that I also inked the edges is 5 1/4 by 1 1/4. We're going to layer those two pieces together. Plaid is the back side of that pretty snowy sky pattern paper that we've got in our circle there. And I'm keeping my ink here because I'm going to do one more bit of inking before we're done this particular part of the project. And these are going to be layered up together so that there's just a little tiny strip of the sapphire showing on either side. But before I stick it on my card, I want to add some silver shimmer trim, and I've got just enough left on this roll to do this card. Now, one tip that I always like to tell people is when you're working with the shimmer trim, there is a clear plastic backing on it. Always leave a little tail of that backing sticking out, because then it's super simple just to peel it back and use the amount of shimmer trim that you want. And I'm going to attempt to get this in the center. I'm not going to measure I'm just going to eyeball it. There we go. And a tiny little bit left over. What do you do with your tiny little bits of leftover shimmer trim that have come off the roll like that? Sometimes what I do is I actually stick it on the edge of my light, thinking, you know, I could make a little dovetail something with that and stick it somewhere, and, you know, that would look cute. So I stick it on my light, and if it stays there too long, then I just get rid of it. And then I've got a piece of periwinkle, which is one of the coordinating colors as well, along with the sapphire, from the Gnomes for winter collection. And this is 5 1/4 by 4 inches. We're going to ink these edges. You know it. We're going to do it. Ink it all the way around. And I use my mini ink blending tool for this. And I just you can see I'm almost at a 90-degree angle to the edge, but just that little bit of foam squishiness gets you that nice little thin edge of inking. If you tip your blending brush from the from the perpendicular to a little bit flatter, you'll get a wider bit of inking on there. So if that's the look you're going for, then go ahead and do that. So I'm going to layer this little bit of sapphire and plaid and silver shimmer on top. Mom says they got a wee bit of snow. That's exciting. And let me see. Maybe I should measure this. So we've got 4 inches. So if I straddle my 6-inch line and put this right in the middle of the 6-inch line. And where does that end up? Just right there. If I put that all the way across, it should possibly be straight-ish. Possibly. Sometimes trying to be more particular gets you a little more crooked. So I've got my pre-scored card base here. And so one side has got a bump and one side has got a dip. And you always want to fold with your bump side to the inside of your card. And you can either use a bone folder or the handle of your scissors to crease that down. Or your fingernail. This is going to be a horizontal card. So I've got my fold at the top. And I'm going to put a little bit of extra adhesive on this, because the inside of our card is going to be a pop-up or have some pop. And so when you get a little extra bulk inside, which you will naturally do with something that's popping up, it's nice to make sure that your card front is well and securely held down so you don't get weird bulges here and there. Nobody likes weird bulges here and there. We try to avoid those. There we go. And then our cute little guys here, let me see. I think I want to kind of put them on like this, kind of straddling that nice little part that we made. But so what I'm going to do, because there's a little bit of bulk here in the center, is I'm going to flip it over like this, and I'm going to add some thin 3D foam tape, which will give it the impression of being lifted a bit, but it will also compensate for that extra bulk in the center so that it's not kind of bulging in a weird place. Oh, look at that, thematic. We don't want it bulging in a weird place. So let's go ahead and stick this down. I'm doing an excellent job with my foam tape, I must say. It's going all over the place. And we're avoiding the center because that's where the extra bulk is already. So we don't need to add any more. And the thin foam tape will help with that, keeping it level, but it won't add too much bulk like a regular foam tape would. It's only half the thickness, and that is good because we're going to have some bulk on the inside of our card, so we don't need to add too much extra on the outside. Okay, let's stick this down like that, and then I probably should have stamped my sentiment on the front before I got everything on there, you know. But I'm going to bring in my sapphire ink again, and I'm going to be using the Happy Winter Sentiment from this stamp set, the Snow Buddy Like You. I'm going to make sure I didn't pick up any sapphire ink around the edges, and then I'm going to go ahead and just stamp that right there on my card front. Happy Winter! And we'll give this a clean off with the stamp chamois. I've got all sorts of acrylic blocks lined up here with all different stamps on them. So lots of things happening. Now, we're going to move to the inside of the card. And the first piece that I want to add is this piece of the really pretty background kind of paper with this lovely, it's got trees, it's got snow, little flurry swirls. There's snowshoes and mittens and tea kettles and hats and sleds and bunny rabbits. The backside has the little gnomes that are skating and holding a snow globe and little snowmen and things. But I'm going to use this side today because I don't want to detract from our little snowmen that we're going to use. And so this is 5.5 by 3 inches. And it's not too often on a regular kind of card that you put a lot of decoration on the inside. It's usually only on fancy fold cards. But I think it's kind of fun if you want to put a little surprise inside, just to create a nice little scene up here and then have all your space for writing down here. So let's attach this at the very top, lined up right along the edges of our card, just like that. The next thing I want to do is the mechanism for the pop. And so I've got a piece of, this is actually from the Mix-In paper pack, and it's just a little tiny dot, which I thought kind of blends in. It's also a pattern paper, so it's not as thick as cardstock, and there's method to my madness. The way I'm doing it, I don't need something that's really thick, and it will also reduce the bulk, because if we did it all with cardstock, it would get just too bulky and it would never get in your envelope and it would be just difficult. So take my word for it, it would be difficult. So this is kind of my own little method for doing pop-ups kind of on the fly. And so I've got a piece here. This is 5.5 by 2.5. And I'm going to line it up this way on my mat. And yes, I'm going off to the side here. And we're going to score it every 1/2 inch. So our first score line will be at 1/2 inch. I'm going to try to get them as precise as I can. 1 inch, this is definitely where a scoreboard would be really good. 1.5 inches. And 2 inches. Just like that. Now we're going to repeat that process again in a minute, but we'll start with this. Okay, so now we're going to crease on all those score lines. So just creasing on our 1/2 inch, creasing on our 1 inch, and I like to make sure that my edges line up before I do a final crease. That way I know that it's not getting too crooked. Don't want too many crookedy bits. 1.5 inches, and then this last one. So this was from the Mix-In paper packet. That's the November, December mix-ins. Okay, now what you want to do is you're going to create a little tubey. Remember from our tower card. So we're kind of taking what we learned yesterday with the tower card and we're transferring it to another kind of card. So we've created ourselves a little square tube, just like in the center of the tower card. And we're going to have this become our little mechanism for pop-up. Now I'm going to take this one strip of 1/2 inch paper here that's on the edge, and this is going to be my tab. So I'm going to apply some adhesive to the outside of it, all the way along. There we go. Make sure that's stuck down. And then I'm going to take my backing off. Like that. There's, oh, a piece of paper or something that was stuck to my adhesive. There we go. At least I smoothed it out. One way or another. There we go. Okay, so now we've got adhesive on this. If we fold it over to the next score line, so we've put adhesive, there's one score line, then there's a 1/2 inch, and then there's a second score line. If we fold on that second score line, you will see that we now have an extra flap over here. And all we're going to do is to fold that flap over and stick it down into the adhesive like that. It's much easier than trying to stand the tube up and get it all lined up and square, okay? And then you can kind of play with it and make sure that it folds both ways. You can give it extra creases. It doesn't hurt it. Just to make sure that it's nice and even all the way around, because you're going to have a little bit of bulk from where that overlapped. So you just give it some extra love and you've created a nice little tube. Now what we're going to do is we're going to stick that tube into our card. Let's just give it an extra squeeze. So what we're going to do is we're going to stick it in here, and we need to have it attach so that these two sides will be stuck to the front and back of our card. So it's going to do that. So we've got it closed. Let's put some adhesive on this half. And we want to make sure we have a good amount of adhesive. You could use liquid glue for this, but you have to be patient, and I am not patient when it comes to paper crafting. Okay, so we've put our adhesive on this side. Now when we flip it over, we need to put our adhesive on this very next side. Stick it right on there. Make sure you don't go over the crease line, because then your card will stick to itself. And it won't open and close properly. Hey, Lynn. Yes, I saw the tower card you created. It looks awesome. Very good job on that. I love all the Christmassy papers. Okay, so now we're going to remove the adhesive from both sides. I know it's tedious because you can't put it down. To take the backing off, maybe this side I'll use my... Nope. I'm going to keep working away at it here. We're going to take the backing off both sides because it's just easier to do them both at once. So says I. There we go. Okay. Now, we've got our adhesive here and here. And so this crease is right in between those two glued bits. So this is the point that's going to get shoved in the corner, the crease of this card. Okay? And all we're going to do is make sure it lines up at the edges, and then make sure it gets pushed right into that corner, and we're going to close our card, and it's going to glue both sides at the same time. And when we open up our card, let's give it a little lovin'. When we open up our card, you can see now we've got that nice little square in the corner. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us a little bit of a guide for our next piece. We've got our sapphire cardstock, and we're going to actually use the light side of the sapphire. And this has been cut to 5.5 by 2 inches. But we want to make this look a little nicer than just a straight line. And so to make it a little nicer than just a straight line, we are going to use an oldie but a goodie. We have the Fancy Borders Thin Cuts. And these have been around for a long time, but let me tell you, they are still available online. And in this set, there's lovely little lacy borders and heart borders and sort of cloud borders with stitches. And then there's sort of this lazy swoop with stitches. and this more hilly swoop with stitches. So I'm going to start with the lazy one first. Yeah, I call it lazy because this is the kind of hill that I like to walk over, where it's just you're lazy and you're just going over a little hill. If you want to be a little more energetic, you can go over the busy one, right? Yes, that's how I determine. I'm going to take a piece of washi tape here, and what I want to do is just to create a nice little hill on here. So I'm going to just line this up and tape it down, and we're going to run this through our die cut machine. There we go. And we're kind of creating a snowy scene. And you might kind of wonder about having blue snow, but you know, sometimes you can use your imagination. And technically, when you look at a landscape, even a photo of a landscape, and there are hills and things off in the distance, you will actually notice that those are blue. They tend to look blue when things are off in the distance. So there's a little bit of trivia for you. I'm just going to stick my washi tape there because I might be able to use it again. And I'm going to bring my card in. And what we're going to do is we're going to attach this sapphire hill just sitting on top of that little cube that we created, but flat against the back. So all I need to do is add a little bit of adhesive on here, like that. Oops. I've got backing sitting here. I keep forgetting that I need to just reach a couple inches there and put it in my little trash can that sits on my desk. It's attached to my desk. Okay, so let's butt that up against there, making sure we're at the sides on either side, and you can start to see a little scene coming together. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use this little 2B square as a spacer. And so I want to bring in another piece of cardstock, and this is mist cardstock. And again, we're going to be using the light side of the mist, and mist is also one of the coordinating colors from the Gnomes for Winter collection. But this time I'm going to be using the more aggressive hill, the one for the energetic people. But I'm going to use this for 2 different layers. So if I put it on the same way on both my layers, it wouldn't look very exciting. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut this twice. I'm going to start over here at the side, and you can totally do this with your fancy borders, thin cuts. You can cut it in 2 separate ways and have it look pretty good together as long as you can line it up, which I can usually do. So I'm going to run that through first, like that. And then I'm going to have to move this so I have space to work. I always store my die cut machine on the floor. Where do you store yours? Properly on a shelf? Probably. I store mine on the floor because it's big and heavy and I don't want it to fall, so it might as well start on the floor. So now we can just take our thin cut, because this thin cut doesn't have like an end, it just stops. And you can take the little bit of the thin cut that has the stitching and kind of like wiggle it around until it nestles itself in where the last stitch was. You can kind of feel it. It's one of those ones where you can kind of feel where it's going. And then we're going to attach that, run it through. So if you have thin cuts like that where there's no end, you can totally kind of move it around and do different things. There's another one like that. The Nativity stamp set and thin cut, the background thin cut that creates the little nativity village in the behind. It's like that. It doesn't really have a cut off on the end, and so you can just keep going. So you could do a whole, 12 by 12 layout with it. All right, so we've got that. Let's put our washi tape aside here because we can probably use it again. And there we have created our nice little swoopy hills. And what we're going to do now is we're going to attach them to that cube. So we only need a 1/2 inch of adhesive at the bottom. So to get this adhered properly, I like to use my Versamat, and that way I can say, ooh, look, 1/2 inch. And we're putting this on the dark side of the mist. There we go. Again, throwing my biddies on my table instead of in the trash. It's just one of those habits, right? And now we can go ahead and line this up with the base of the card, making sure we're at the sides, and then we can go ahead and fold our card shut. And boy, oh boy, look at that. We've now got 2 layers, but 1 is never enough. 2 is never enough. Let's do a 3rd layer. So we have to make another block. So let's go through this process again. We're going to take our 2.5 inch piece of pattern paper. And I use this pattern paper because it kind of looks snowy. So, if it's visible, which it will be sort of, it just kind of blends in. It's just snowy looking. And so let's do this again. We're going to score on every 1/2 inch all the way across our 2.5 inch piece, 2.5 by 5.5. There we go. We're going to move a little faster on this one, and then we're going to crease down our score lines all the way across. So if you're thinking about doing a pop card like this, you can envision that depending on the size of your card, you could have several layers, because this little layer in between is only a 1/2 inch. You do need to be aware of the fact that anything you stick to these layers, when you fold, they will increase in height by 1/2 inch. So if you put something really tall that went right to the top and then you closed it, it would actually stick out by 1/2 inch. So that's something to keep in mind. And our next layer, when you fold, it will actually move up by 1 inch because there's 2 1/2 inches of this, of the blocking. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. You have to account for that height of the blocks. The good thing about this is, though, that because we're doing them with pattern paper and we're only doing 1/2 inch, and because they're kind of side by side when it folds, you're only getting the depth or the thickness of one of these all along, because it's going 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. They're staggered when it closes. That's what I'm trying to say. They're not one right on top of the other. All right. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to give it some loving. Make sure it folds nicely in every direction. It's nice and square. And this is especially good for me because I don't use a scoreboard. So this kind of evens it out in case any of my score lines were a little bit off. So again, we're going to put some adhesive on 2 of the panels that are on either side of the fold here. So we're going to put some adhesive here. And then we're going to flip it over and we're going to put some adhesive on the opposite side with that crease in between them. There we go. You could use red tape for this too if you want, but I think this stuff will hold it well enough. There we go. And the backing off. So this is just repeating what we did before. So now we got to do the fiddling. Let's get our backing off. There we go. That one went easier. I must be getting better at it. There we go. Okay, so now we've got our crease here with our adhesive on either side. We're holding it in the spot that has no adhesive. And we're going to take this piece and we're going to stick it in this crease now that's created between the mist cardstock and the back of our card. And then just fold it down. Make sure everything gets stuck good. And now you can see that we have two squares, one in front of the other. So let me show you what I was talking about. When I fold it down, they're not all bunched up in one spot. As you go farther across the card, they're actually kind of layering up this way. So that kind of helps to reduce some of the bulk, and also using pattern paper instead of cardstock. Now we want to do one last layer. And we're going to use the periwinkle for this, and we are using the light side of the periwinkle. We're going to bring in that same piece of thin cut that we used before, but this time we're just going to use it as is. One thing that I want to ensure, and I'm using my Versamat to help me with, that piece of our little square that we created is 1/2 inch. So I can't cut my hill down past the last 1/2 inch. Otherwise my buffer is going to be showing. And, you know, it's kind of like your slip showing. You don't want your buffer showing, right? So we're going to keep it up above that last 1/2 inch. Now this piece of cardstock was a little smaller than the other two. So the other two were 2 inches. This is 1.5 inches in height. So let's bring in our... The other two were 2 inches tall. So 5.5 by 2 inches. And the reason why they still look layered is because the sapphire at the back sat above the 1/2 inch, blocking that we created. So I decided not to put the pattern paper all the way to the bottom and the cardstock all the way to the bottom because I wanted to reduce bulk. So I stopped my pattern paper up here at 3 inches, and I stopped my blue here at 2 inches, and then the extra 1/2 inch was there. And that helps because that gives room for all of those extra little bits, right? You got to kind of think about that when you're thinking, oh, I got to get this in the mail. Now, if you're hand delivering a card, that doesn't so much matter. Now, again, we only have 1/2 inch at the bottom to put adhesive on because we have a 1/2 inch spacer. So let's go ahead and add our adhesive. I know this video is a little bit longer today, but it's kind of a fun technique. And it's one where it kind of works for anything. If you just make those little spacers, you can layer up anything and make it pop. So even if you're just, you know, you're at a crop and you think, oh, wouldn't it be nice to do a pop-up, but I don't know what to do. Just make yourself a little square tube, any size you want. I like the 1/2 inch because that works well. And then just add your layers in. So here we're going in with our periwinkle. We're going to push it right down into that crease. And then we can close it, making sure we lined it up with the top and bottom. And there we have, look at those fun layers of stitched, swoopy, snowy, wintry hills. And now we can add in some fun snowmen. So we've got our first little guy here, and we colored him on the front. So we're going to kind of do the same coloring. We've got our red-brown, and this is the darkest of the red-brown. We're going to just color his antlers all the way around like this. Do 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 do. And while we've got the brown, we're also going to color in his hot cocoa, because he's got some hot cocoa with marshmallows happening here, because he's smart. He wants to stay warm while he's outside, although, I don't know. Hot cocoa and a snowman could be a bad combination. Then we're going to do the lavender. Let's bring in the lavender. We're going to use the lightest color. We're going to color his little cheekies. And then his scarf. All the way across. And I like to turn my paper while I'm coloring. Who else does that? Turns their paper here, there, and everywhere while they're coloring so that you get the best angle for your hand. And then let's also color in his little boots. Little boots like that. And then we need to color his nose. We've got our tan blend here. We're going to use the darkest color to color in his nose. And then let's also color his mug. We're going to use the vintage blue, and we're going to use the lightest color of the vintage blue. Give him a nice blue mug. There we go. And that's that. Now all we need to do, the exciting part, we get to, whoops, see, that's where I've been throwing my backings. We get to fussy cut. Now, this stamp set does have thin cuts available, so you can get it with the thin cuts while supplies last. But I'm a fussy cutting kind of gal, and so I just go around and do it this way. I'm going to cut up some excess. I like to leave a little halo of the white all the way around. And let's see, yeah, we'll go into the inside. Why not? And just follow the edge of your image like that. Let's cut off to the edge there. And I like to pivot my paper. That always gives me the nicest cut. All the way around the scarf. Almost there. We're getting in the home stretch. And the antlers. Now the antlers, because they're kind of closed, we're not going right into the antlers. We're just going to kind of bump. This is where the pivoting comes in handy. Bump. And bump. Fussy cutting is one of those things where you either love it or you don't love it. And most people who love it do it a lot. And so you get better the more you practice, right? So there's our fun little snow guy. And we're going to stick him down here right at the front. Now, I am going to add a little bit of foam tape on the back of this dude. Just because. So I'm going to put a little bit down right where his bum would be. And then a tiny little snippet. And this is the thin foam tape. So yes, it's narrow from side to side, but it's thin. So it's half the thickness. So, but I think they just look cuter with the foam tape, right? They're not, we're trying to make it look dimensional. So we're adding a little dimension. Just a little. And we're not going to put everything all in the same place. So it'll be spread out. Am I selling you yet on that? Okay, let's put this little guy kind of hanging out here on the snow hill. And I want to make sure that everything will close. Whoops. So I'm going to just close it down like that. And you will notice, if you look at it this way, I left a tiny little bit of distance there on under his feet. That's because he's popped up on foam tape and then his paper's there. If I shoved him right into that crack, every time I folded it, those feet would try to buckle and they would get all gunky after a while. They would be all rumply looking. So we want to have his little feeties have a little bit of clearance from the ground, okay? Just envision he's on a little bit of snow coverage. Well, I also stamped out our little ski dude and our little skater dude. I colored them up the same way I did on the front with the green and the blue. And I use that red brown for the skis as well. And some of the darker mid blue for the mittens. And so our little guys here, they're going to go on here too. So this guy, he can get some foam tape all over him. He can just get crazy with the foam tape because he's going on the back of the card. So let's add some of this thin foam tape. And I should try to put a little bit on his ski poles. So I know this is narrow, but I'm going to make it even narrower. Who else does this? Surgery on their foam tape. To make it fit. I'll use this piece. That other piece got mangled. There we go. The non-stick scissors really help with that. When you use good foam tape and good non-stick scissors, then you can kind of do that kind of thing. All right, let's peel off the backing. And he's going to be on the ski slope there at the back on the Sapphire ski slope. He's enjoying his time at Whistler. The one in the front there with the hot chocolate, that's me. Although I used to love downhill skiing. We used to go to a place in Peterborough called Devil's Elbow, and that was a lot of fun when I was younger. But now I'd be afraid because if I ever fell down, A, I'd never get back up, and B, I would probably hurt myself. So we're going to stick him right there. We don't have to worry. He's not going to move, so he's not going to pop up above the height. And then this little guy is going to go over here so that they're not all crunched together in the same spot. So again, just like our first little guy, we can add a little bit of foam tape right down at the bottom of him. And then a tiny little touch on his feet, on his skates. Like so. And and I realized now that I did the same thing when I was making this last night. I forgot to do the stamping on the inside of my card before I put all of this stuff in here. So this guy's going to go up here on our little snow hill. So we're just going to stick him on there like that. He's skating, but you know, you could skate on a hill. Why not? He's a snowman. He can skate anywhere he wants. So there we go. We've got all of our things, but let's add our sentiment. Now that we've done the whole inside, I've got this one that says, there's snowbody like you. We're going to use our sapphire. So now that we've done this, we need to make sure that we don't get sapphire ink all over our block because we're stamping on a completed card. There's snowbody like you. There we go. Whew. It's always a little bit nerve-wracking. We'll give this a wipe. There we go. And then just to add a little extra something. Whoops. Gotta love magnets on your thing. We're gonna grab these two little snowflakes that are also in the stamp set. And let's do the big one first. Our tiny little 1x1 block. Stick it on there, make sure it's seasoned. And we're going to ink it up. Stamp a little snowflake there. Let's give that a wash. Put it back on the carrier sheet. Little tiny stamps need to go right back on the carrier sheet. Make sure that's seasoned. Make sure we didn't stick it in the ink pad. Let's add another little snowflake there. And another little snowflake there. Made our little triangle of embellishy stamping. And there we have our completed card. So we started out with just our plain pre-scored card base. We added our periwinkle cardstock to the front, layering out with some sapphire and some plaid from the Gnomes for Winter. Little bit of silver shimmer trim for some snowy sparkle. And then, of course, stamping around this thin cut circle using our circles, thin cuts, and stamping all their little faces looking down or looking up. Could be. They could be making snow angels, and stamped our sentiment. Then when we open up, we have our 3 layers of beautiful snowy hills with all of our fun little snow guys hanging out in the winter. And we created those little 1/2 inch square tubes to create a pop-up. So you can use that technique on any card to create a pop-up on the inside. And the fun thing is that it really makes a nice display piece, because it's going to just sit on your table like that and look all cutesy and fun. And I think that is a super fun card, and everybody loves a little surprise inside. So I hope you enjoyed seeing that card to come together. And of course, it fits right in a standard size envelope and probably would make it through without extra postage, I'm going to guess, because that's not too thick. All right, have a wonderful rest of the morning. Be sure to check out the game that was posted this morning and the 3 challenges that are posted. And we will be on at 11:30 for Chat and Craft. We are going to finish Chat and Craft a little bit early at 1:45 today because I have an appointment and I have to pick up my daughter early from school to get to that appointment. And this afternoon's demo has also been rescheduled, fingers crossed, not at 3:30, but at 6 o'clock. I think I posted it for 6 o'clock. If you look at the schedule, you'll see, because I have to get through that appointment, and then I'll be home and do the video. Alrighty. Have a wonderful rest of your morning, and we'll see you again soon. Toodaloo. Bye.